Hi, this is Paul Katz, and I'm going to show a demo of how you can use Azure Private Link to connect a SQL Azure PaaS database into a virtual network in Azure. Virtual networks themselves are often very much locked down for a variety of compliance reasons, and it's important, however, to be able to securely link to platform as a service resources that are also on Azure. So we'll start by going over the assets that will be involved in this demo. We have Prequiz, which is a SQL Azure database. We have a firewall, which will have firewall policies. We have the web server, which we're going to connect to the database, and then SQL Server. That's the server that Prequiz is based on. So let's start with SQL. Let's start with the SQL Azure database. And you will go to the server, and you can see that's the server name, efficiencynext1.database.windows.net. That's a good one to remember. And I'm going to go to the firewall because I want to show you something. We've completely disabled public access. In other words, I wouldn't be able to access it from my workstation right now. There's no way whatsoever someone can get to it unless it's through a private access conduit. So just to show just to kind of set things up a bit further, this is the firewall on the virtual private network. You can see that it has a public IP address, private IP, and there's the virtual network it's assigned to. And I think I mentioned before, these are the firewall policies. And so this is configured to be pretty restrictive. If we go to the rules, and we go to network rules, you can see that we are allowing inbound ADN 443, inbound and outbound. We're also allowing RDP. That is further restricted actually in a network security policy. So I'm not providing like open-ended access to RDP, but here I am doing it here. The big one I wanted to show is this one, which is that we have a outbound. It works for inbound and outbound, but we have a deny rule in place for 1433. What this basically means is that if you are leaving the virtual network through the firewall, you are not going to be able to do a 1443. Some other things that are worth looking at, we have, I think I mentioned before, we have, let me go to the route table. It'll show the route table for. So we have we have a route table, and what this shows is that we have our web subnet on the virtual private network headed to our virtual appliance. So essentially what we're saying is that if you are going to, because the subnet is here, and this is the first hop. So our web server is on the web subnet. It has to go through the firewall for traditional communication. If the communication is leaving the subnet through the firewall, it has to leave through the firewall unless there is a local-to-local connection, in which case the firewall wouldn't really come into play. So then we also have a network security group, just to kind of lock things down further. I was hoping to click on it and get there. Let me go to the network security group. I'm going to go to DevWeb05 because this will be so you can see it's on the web subnet. And if we go to network settings, you can see this network security group. It's attached to the web subnet, so it applies. This is where we're allowing RDP, but only for a certain number of IP addresses, the usual HTTP access, and then also IaaS publishing with a limited amount. So even here, we're not allowing 1433 in. And as far as outbound port rules, we are allowing a private connection we are allowing through the network security group some local connections, but then we're also denying all other outbound SQL. So really, this is a locked down environment, even between machines, because network security group generally, is associated with policies for machines. We're not allowing 1433 out, except of course to this location, and this IP address will become important in a second. So locked down. I believe this is a pretty good mirror of the environment that I've been reviewing earlier. So the question is, how do you do it? How do you get this web server to, this is the web server here, how do we get it so that the SQL Server connection will work? And the answer is virtual private net, is Azure Private Link. And I'll show the configuration. This is private access. So it shows approved here because you can set this up from the SQL Azure side, but you can also set it up from the virtual private network side. And when you set up a private network, when you set up an Azure Private Link to a virtual network, the owner of the PaaS asset has to approve it. So this is an example of, I'm going to click on this endpoint, and you can see that it is establishing it in the web subnet. It has its own network interface. We go to here, nothing too much out of the ordinary here. Primarily, there's the private IP address. I believe DNS. It just inherits. There's some DNS stuff that it automatically configured. This is, generally speaking, you can let it do it, but as you can see, there's the routing through the private link. And so with this, what this does is it creates what effectively is a local device, an endpoint in the web subnet. And so if we were to look at, if we were to go to private endpoints, you can see it's listed underneath the virtual networks. In this case, you can see it's listed right here. And the private IP, of course, is 10.0.1.5. So you remember that from my internal network security group routing rule, where we allow 1433 to this IP, which is, if you have a network security group and you're blocking SQL at that level, that's important. If you're not, if you're only blocking at the firewall level, you don't need that extra subnet rule. You don't need the subnet rule that allows for the local traffic. But what we have here is a local appliance on the virtual network, 10.0.1.5, and essentially this is the equivalent of accessing the SQL Azure database as if it were a local SQL database. So at this point, the firewall doesn't come into play. So if we go to the virtual machine and we do, I'm going to do prequiz 2. If you actually install the initial, if you try to use the first SQL Server ODBC driver that comes with the server, it might not work. You really want to install the latest ODBC driver, if nothing else, so you can properly test this. And as you can see, this is the database URL. I'm going to click next, and we're going to do, I'm going to need to put in my password. I'm going to grab it off screen. And we're connecting in. And as you can see, we can actually look at all the databases that are there. There's prequiz. And I mean, really the fact that we can see the database is pretty much a giveaway that this is working. But, let's be formal about it. And actually, I thought there was a connection test. Maybe it's at the very end. Finish. Test data source. There we are. Tested successfully. So you might be wondering, well, okay, if this is a public, the database URL is usually a public address with more of a public IP address, but because of the private endpoint and Azure Private Link, if we do it's not going to get us anything, no response, but if we do a ping, I'm going to bring this down into here. You'll see that it's 10.0.1.5. So the virtual endpoint, it changes the DNS to use the local IP address within the virtual subnet. So again, this allows for a successful connection test to the SQL Azure database, despite the firewall blocking 1433 outbound, despite the network security group being restrictive of anything that isn't a connection to a couple local IP addresses on the subnet, and it works. So this gets to kind of the why you would want to do it this way. SQL Azure, platform as a service, it's a shared service. It's difficult to reliably know what the database's IP address will be at any given moment. Databases share IP addresses, meaning it's really impossible through just normal traffic configuration to get to be able to connect to just your data source without also being able to connect to others. Which, if in a data loss prevention strategy, you want to prevent that. You want to make sure that people can only send data to where they're supposed to be able to. And so essentially the best way to do it is the virtual private, the private endpoint. If there's any thought that you have to open 1443 on the firewall to make this work, that is not true. This works even if the firewall itself is restrictive, which is really the point. Thanks for watching, and hope to meet with you all soon.